Hello everyone, welcome back. So if you weren't here earlier, we made 3 doughs. We made one multigrain dough and 2 rye doughs. One is at 20% rye and the other one's at 30% rye. So I wanted to test it out and see how they did. I usually make the sandwich loaves at 20% rye, so I want to see how the 30% rye does. So what we're going to do now, we have the 3 doughs. And I'll show you how one of them, this is the multigrain, show you what it looks like. It's been rising for about 4 hours, a little over 4 hours, and it fills the bowl. If anyone was here earlier, it was probably like over here, but now it fills the bowl, and that's what I said was going to happen. It's going to fill the bowl, so I know that it's done. So now it's time to shape it. So we're going to shape them into sandwich loaves, which is pretty easy. And I'll show you, I have it right here. I have silicone mats to make it easier, but you don't need them. It's not necessary. But this is just because I've had some unfortunate incidents with the bread sticking, so now I use these. But if you have a good non-stick loaf pan, it shouldn't be a problem. Now this is the loaf pan I'm going to use. It's a Pullman loaf pan. You don't have to use a Pullman loaf pan, but something that's good about it is it has a cap. Mattress Demon says that's smart. It is smart. It has a cap on it and it has really tall sides, very tall, so it's going to make a tall loaf, and that's why I like this one. But you don't necessarily have to use it. But I really think if you're going to make bread at home, a Pullman loaf is a good investment. I have 3 here, as you can see. I have lots of these, lots and lots and lots of these. But only 3 right now. So I'll show you how we're going to shape it. I'm going to gently flour the surface. Mattress Demon, how are you? Do you want to be called Mattress Demon or by your Christian name? Okay, so I'm going to take it out into my floured surface. You can see all the gluten development there. Now what we're going to do is flatten it out. You can use a rolling pin. I actually forgot to bring the rolling pin. You don't have to use a rolling pin. I'll show you how to do it with your hands. So I'm just gonna stretch it out. It's okay if you pop some of the bubbles. In fact, I might pop this big one. So see what I have here? I have a big rectangle. It's what you want. Big rectangle like that. Try to make it as even as possible. And now I'm going to roll it up. So here's our rectangle. Roll it, kind of taking the sides, keep going until you have a nice little, then pinch it. The part that you pinch will go on the bottom, so don't worry about that. Pinch the edges. So see, now you have this. It's okay if it's not perfect because we're going to put it in here. So when it's rising, it'll rise in loaf form because it's already in the loaf pan. So this makes it even easier for us. I'm going to put this in. It goes in like this, if you have one. Try to get it even. Mattress Demon said would be less wasteful than paper. Yeah, so you can use parchment paper. That's a good point. But these are, I mean, I've had them for a long time and I use them a lot. Well, maybe I've had them for like 2 years, but I use them quite a lot. So they'll last you a long time. So it is a little less wasteful than paper. Although you can use parchment paper. So it looks like this. Kind of just evening it out now. Now this part is optional. I'm going to top it with flax seeds. So what you should do if you're going to top it with some flax seeds is spray it with some water. This is just water. This will help the flax seeds stick. And then you just take out some flax seeds and put it on the bread. I don't usually measure, but it's probably a few grams at most. So that's good. Yeah, that's a good amount. So now it looks like this with flax seeds on top. Now when it rises, it's going to, like I said, take the form of the loaf pan. And tomorrow when I go to bake it, I have two options. I can bake it with the cap on, or I could bake it with the cap off. If I bake it with the cap on, it comes out perfectly rectangular, like a perfect rectangle. If I bake it with the cap off, it's going to have a domed top. So it depends on what you prefer. But if you have the cap, that's a good option. Now I do put the cap on because I'm going to put it back in the fridge overnight, and tomorrow we're going to bake it. So I do put the cap on and put it back in the fridge regardless. So that was the multigrain. Now we have our rye. This one's stuck to the top. Pretty sure this is our 20% rye by the way it looks. It's very puffed up and nice. This one, let me check. Yeah. This one is 30%. This one's 20%. You can see the 30% is a little darker. But let's do the 20% first. Again, this one has been rising for 4 hours, just like the other one. And before it was down here, and now it's all the way to the top. That's what you want. You want it to rise all the way to the top. You want to just touch the cap. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to flour the surface. Flour your hands. And just take it out. This one's sticky. Sticky, sticky, sticky. Okay. So this dough's a little sticky, so make sure you flour your hands. And I'm going to make it into a rectangle again. Okay, Mom says hello. Hello, okay, Mom. I was wearing the bread apron earlier, but you weren't here. So I switched back to the cat apron. So right now we're just shaping the bread. Okay, Mom slept in. She didn't get to see the bread this morning. So I'm shaping the bread. And we're making them into sandwich loaves. So first I'm going to make it into a rectangle. Try to get it as even as possible. So now we have a rectangle. You can see. I'm going to roll it up just like we did before. So I'm going to start by pinching the sides, going up. Then just keep doing that. Keep doing that. Then eventually you're going to have a little loaf. Pinch the edges. The edge that you pinched, the long edge that you pinch is going to go down, face down into the pan. This pan, oh, this pan's empty. That one's full. Okay. So we're going to take our pan. I'm going to line it with a silicone mat, but you don't have to if you have a good nonstick pan. I've just had too many mishaps with the bread sticking, so I always line it now. I was saying before that I use the Pullman loaf because it has high sides, so it makes a really tall loaf. It also comes with a cap, which is helpful for storing it in the fridge, and also helpful if you want to have a perfectly rectangular loaf. So I'm going to put this right in here. The seam is going to go down into the pan. I'm going to even it out with my hands. It's okay if you pop some of the bubbles. In fact, you might want to pop some of the bigger bubbles. And it looks like this. So now I'm going to, optional, I'm going to add caraway seeds to the top, the same way I added flax seeds to the last one. So spray it with a little bit of water. That's to help the seeds stick. And then add some caraway seeds or other seeds, whatever seeds you want. And then I'm going to put the cap on because when I'm done here, these are going into the fridge. Okay. So now, last but not least, our 30% rye. So this is what this one looks like now. Remember, this one too was down here before, and 4 hours later, I think it's more than double, right? And it's nice and shaky because it has a lot of air bubbles in it. So we're going to do the same thing. flour the surface. And then I'm just going to take my hands This one is tacky. That's from the rye flour. So now we're going to do the same thing. It's good to keep one of your hands clean when you're doing this so you can get the flour. This hand is dirty and this hand is the cleaner one. Or have like a bowl of flour next to you so you don't get your flour, your bulk flour dirty. You just have your bench flour ready. So we're going to make this into a rectangle again. You can use a rolling pin for this, but you don't need to. I was going to show you a rolling pin, but I actually forgot to bring it. So I'll show you how to do it by hand. And next time I'll show you how to do it with a rolling pin. But as you can see, it's pretty easy to do by hand, so no need. If you could imagine, at this stage, for maybe a different type of bread, you can get pretty creative. So once you have it as a rectangle, you can actually fill it with something before you roll it up. I've done this with like cinnamon raisin bread, and there's other types of bread I can't think that I've done that with, but definitely cinnamon raisin bread is a good one. So you can fill it up at this stage and then roll it up, and then it creates a swirl in the middle. Always an option. But for this, we're not going to do that. So see, we have a rectangle. Nice rectangle. Now I'm going to roll it up. Try to get it even. I push it down into the pan so it rises as evenly as possible. But like I said, it's like going to rise pan shaped, so that is good. That is a plus because it's in the pan. So I'm going to add seed to this one too. So this is the 30% rye. So I expect it'll get a little less rise than the 20% rye, but we'll see what happens. It rose perfectly fine in the bowl. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, the finished result. And that's what it'll look like. So now what's going to happen, you see we have these 3 with the caps on. They're going to go in the fridge overnight. It's still fermenting right now. So while they're sitting in here, they're rising. Very slowly, but they're rising. We don't want them to rise too much or it'll just, fortunately, because it's in the loaf pan, it won't be as bad if I over ferment it a little bit. It'll be okay. Because I'm not really handling it too much tomorrow. I'm really just putting it in the oven because it's already in the pan it's going to bake in. But basically when you over ferment it, it starts to lose its shape and it becomes flat. So you don't want that to happen, even in the loaf pan where it's the side effects, consequences are a little mitigated by the fact that it's in this loaf pan. You still don't want that to happen. So since I'm not going to bake it right now, I'm going to put it in the fridge overnight, and in the morning I'll take it out of the fridge. Then I'll decide if I want to bake it with the lid on or off. With the lid on, it'll become a perfect rectangle. It's really cute. But with the lid off, it'll have a dome shape. And I really base that off how high the bread rises. If it doesn't rise that high, I usually leave the lid on. But if it's like touching the lid tomorrow morning, it's risen so high that it's touching the lid, I will take the lid off because it'll just become a mess if it's that high already. So that's how I decide if I'm going to bake it with the lid on or off. But you can use your judgment and based on what kind of bread you want, what shape you want it to be. So tomorrow morning, I'll put it in the oven. I'm going to preheat the oven to 475. Then I'll put it in the oven and lower the temperature to 450. Bake for 20 minutes. If the lid is on, I'll take the lid off after 20 minutes and dial it down to 420. If the lid is already off, don't need to do anything to the bread. I'll just lower it down to 420 after 20 minutes and then bake for another 20 minutes. So it should be in the oven for at least 40 minutes. I'm going to probably leave these in for a little longer because I want them to be browner than the last time I baked them, which was yesterday. So I'll show you that bake. But yeah, that's what's happening tomorrow. If you're making these, wait at least an hour after they come out of the oven to cut into them. But other than that, you're good to go. You are good to go. So yes, so soon I'm going to put these into the fridge so they can slow down the fermentation process. So the fermentation, like I said earlier, is affected by temperature. And something with sourdough that novice sourdough bakers have trouble with is getting, and sometimes I have trouble with, everyone has trouble with, but it's really getting the perfect fermentation. Sourdough is a slow fermentation, but that doesn't mean that you can't over ferment, or more commonly, people who are new to sourdough under ferment. They're bad at judging when it's done and they call it too soon. And then you have problems with the crumb and the texture. But I want to show you, in maybe in another stream, I'll show you examples of under-fermented loaves and what that could look like. But yes, under-fermenting is usually a bigger problem than over-fermenting for new sourdough bakers. But the temperature is affecting that. So right now, although it's not too warm in here, it is fermenting relatively quickly compared to if I put it in the fridge, where it's going to slow down the fermentation quite a bit. And I can leave it in the fridge for probably 2 days and it would be fine. I'm not going to do that, but that's how slow it's fermenting in the fridge. It's fermenting rather slow. So I'm going to put it in the fridge for probably over 12 hours, probably like 14 hours. Hello, Kay McBain. Let me know if you want me to call you something else. But Kay McBain asks, what happens when you over ferment? So when you over ferment the sourdough, it basically loses its strength. So the bacteria and the yeast inside the sourdough have eaten up all of the nutrients So essentially, when you're fermenting something, the bacteria and yeast are eating the nutrients in the bread, right? They're pre-digesting them for us. But what happens when they exhaust all the nutrients, they don't have any more power to form those bubbles, because them forming those bubbles happens when they eat the nutrients. So when you over ferment the sourdough, the first thing you'll notice is that the dough itself is sticky and does not hold a shape. So earlier I was shaping it and the dough held its shape when I shaped it. But if it were over fermented, it would be sticky and it wouldn't be able to hold its shape. Then it would be very hard to Ifarita says, hello again, Elisa in chat. Hello, Ifarita, welcome back. So it's not going to hold its shape. And then when you go to score it, if you use a razor to score it, which I recommend, it's going to be hard to score because it's so sticky. Then when you bake it, it's going to be flat. The crumb will probably be okay, but the loaf itself will be flat. Instead of getting a good oven spring, you're going to get a flat loaf. So over fermenting is not ideal, but the loaf itself will still be edible. It just will be harder to manage the loaf, and the loaf will be flat. If you under ferment, especially if you severely under ferment, you're going to get a loaf that is less edible. Kay McCain says, gotcha, great explanation, thanks. You're welcome. So when you under ferment, that just means that you didn't give the sourdough enough time for the bacteria and yeast to eat up all the nutrients that it needs to eat. So it actually has too much activity when you put it in the oven. It's very interesting. The loaf itself will be heavy when it's out of the oven and when it's before you bake it, but when it's out of the oven, it'll still be heavy. It might actually get a good oven spring. It's called like a false oven spring or a false crumb. But when you cut into it, it's going to have really big gaping holes. You know, instead of like more even holes spread out, you're going to get like really big gaping holes. And the crumb itself is going to be kind of sticky, almost like it was underbaked. But it wasn't underbaked. It was actually just most likely under fermented. So under fermenting usually is a bigger problem than over fermenting, but you still want to avoid over fermenting too, because like I said, the dough is hard to handle. You're not going to get a good oven spring, which everyone wants a good oven spring. Oven spring is just the way your dough rises. So if you get like a high loaf, that's considered a good oven spring. And Ifarita says, I really miss the sub button here on this channel. Is there not a sub button? I guess there's a follow button, right? There's a follow button. I'm not sure if I am able to have subscribers yet. I don't know if I have to be an affiliate to get subscribers. Hey McCain, thank you for following. Thank you. Hopefully we'll see. You'll be learning more about sourdough. Are there any other questions, Kay McCain, you have about sourdough? What kind of things do you like to bake, and what kind of things would you like to bake in the future? Today we made the sandwich loaves, but last week we made sourdough bagels, and next week I'm hoping to make flatbread and cornbread. So that will be fun. Okay. And you can even, so I'm talking about sourdough, but even with yeast-based breads, you can under and over ferment them. It's just that when you make it with the store-bought yeast, it's usually takes a very quick time to rise, so people don't usually under ferment it. Like it'll rise in an hour. I'm sure some people might over ferment, but considering it rises in just 1 hour, it's not usually under fermented. So let me show you some examples. I showed everyone earlier, but I'll show you some examples of what we did or what I did yesterday. I'll clean this up really quick. A bench scraper is good to have. This is a bench scraper to clean up your mess. Kay McCain says, I love cooking but do not bake very often. Something I want to learn more about is in general. So thanks for the content. The next thing I'm baking is homemade pizza. Should I ferment for a longer period with that type of dough? No, if you make, I'm assuming you're making it with like a yeast packet. Kay McCain. Kay McBain. I think it's Kay McBain. I think you're making it with a yeast packet. And if you make it with a yeast packet, just follow the instructions. Yeah, dry yeast. Follow the instructions. It shouldn't take that long. I think it'll take an hour. But yeah, I would just follow the instructions. I wouldn't ferment longer. I do make sourdough pizza, and I want to stream that as well. Okay. This guy just fell. Okay. So my hands are still a little doughy. Here, I just want to show you this really quick. This is like the butt of the rye bread that we made yesterday. We ate half of it, but this is the crumb. Hi, Munchkin. This is the crumb. It's still pretty soft. It's getting a little stale, but it's still pretty soft. And you can see if it, yeah. So you can see the crumb. This is what I mean. It's a pretty tight crumb, which sandwich bread usually is a little tighter. But you can tell there's no big gaping holes. The holes are even. And the big gaping holes would be a sign of either poor shaping or under fermentation. So this one is good. So this one is the rye. And then I'll show you the multigrain. When I checked the multigrain this morning, it was still very, very soft. Yeah, it's still soft. This multigrain stays soft forever. So it's very, very soft. And in the multigrain, I added buckwheat, millet, oats, whole wheat, buckwheat, millet, and cornmeal. So you can see, and there's also flax on the top and flax inside. So you can see some of the grains I left whole. So you get it, like the millet and the buckwheat's left whole. So you can it actually adds texture to it. But this is what it looked like. So, I mean, it was cut into, but it looked like this. And I left the cap off. So that's why it has a dome top. It's domed like that. But if I left the cap on while it was baking, it would have been like a perfect rectangle and not have this dome. So Kay McBain, what do you like to cook? You said that you like to cook. You said you're going to make pizza. Tomorrow, which I guess you're getting a sneak peek a little bit. Tomorrow, I'm going to make dosas for the first time. So it's definitely a test. I'm testing it. But and I'm going to do it with sourdough, which is why, I'm testing it with sourdough. And dosa is just it's a fermented crepe. Essentially, it's a South Indian fermented crepe, but it's savory, made with beans and rice. So I'm testing that tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe you'll hear about it if it goes well. Or maybe you'll hear about it if it goes badly too, if I'm an honest. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm doing that tomorrow. Meal prepping. And it's a part of meal prep and also part of recipe testing, because whatever happens with it, we're going to eat it. So that's how it works here. No food goes to waste. Are there any other questions about what we did today or about baking in general, cooking? Something else that I want to do on here and in general is, well, for those of you who don't know, maybe stumbled upon this, this is a plant based and vegan channel, so everything I make is plant based. Um, but I also have a gluten free sourdough starter. Um, and I'm working on making a gluten free sourdough, an actual loaf. I mean, I have it down. I just, I'm being picky with it. Um, so I'm going to recipe test it again. But I want to show you all how to make not only like a regular sourdough starter from scratch, but also gluten free one as well. I know a lot of my customers are always asking about the gluten free sourdough. They're always asking, is it possible to make gluten free sourdough? It is. It is a little trickier, but it is possible. So I want to do that. So I'll figure out a way to show you, because obviously I can't show you how to make the starter like within a few hours. I can show you how to do it. Yes, that's a good question. So I can show you how to okay, mom, that's actually where I was getting at. I can show you how to do it, but it takes 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks. The gluten-free one takes longer. Um, but once you have it, it lasts forever, right? It doesn't go bad, right? It lasts, like you can give it to your children and your grandchildren. That's how long it lasts. So it does take 2 weeks, but then you have yeast forever. If Rita says, once I made a ciabatta bread with green olives. Oh, I effed it up. Maybe you can teach me how to make ciabatta bread. Ciabatta bread is basically like a regular bread, but it's just a high hydration bread. And then because it's a high hydration bread, it just is make me the right. I understand. I understand. Yeah, it's a high hydration bread, and because it's a high hydration bread, it's messy, which might be what happened. I'm not sure how you messed it up, but maybe that's what happened because it was a high hydration. And because it's high hydration, it actually has no shape. And I know that sounds weird. You think ciabatta has a shape? It actually doesn't. It's just like they plop it on and kind of roughly shape it into a rectangle, and that's it. And it's flat. It's also flat because of the high hydration, or at least flatter than most breads are. That's just because of the high hydration. So there's a lot of things to like consider when you're a lot of variables when you're making bread, but most of them come down to flour, water, yeast, and salt. All those levels are what's changing the bread, and then the ferment and time. I guess the next variable would be time. But yeah, ciabatta is, I think it's an easy bread, but it's an annoying bread because it's sticky. The dough is so sticky. But yeah, we can do ciabatta. That might be fun to watch me get dough stuck to my fingers. But the thing is also with ciabatta is you shouldn't touch it too much. You should just let it do its thing because it's so sticky. So if Rita, I don't know if that was the problem, was the high hydration, or if there was another problem that you had with the ciabatta. But yeah, that is a good one. That's a good one. And yeah, going back to making your own yeast, I want to emphasize again, it can't be emphasized enough, that it lasts forever and it's actually pretty easy to do. What I could do is like 1 week I could start making it and then I could show you the process, like how it's doing after the next week. That might be a way I could do it because I do want to show you how it's done on here because I want everyone to be able to do it themselves. I do have a blog post on my blog, jerseygirlbreadshop.com, of making your own no discard sourdough starter. I make it with rye flour, and rye flour has a lot of nutrients that the bacteria and yeast like. So that's a good flour to start with. And then I also don't discard it. So that means that I don't waste any of it while it's brewing up in there. I know if you've watched videos on sourdough or seen, read anything on sourdough, you've probably seen everything about how they discard. They take half of the sourdough and they discard it. And what do you do? What do you do with the discard? I mean, there are things to do with discard, but not if you're discarding every single day, right? You don't have enough time in a day or enough appetite to make like a sourdough discard banana bread every single day or sourdough discard pancakes every day, right? So I use a no discard method. You only need to discard if you want to, or if you the sourdough is just so like there's so much sourdough starter that it's just overfilling the jar, and then obviously you would discard it. But yeah, I want to do that on this channel. I will hopefully do that soon. Are there any other like suggestions or things that you would like to see? We have ciabatta. I know someone said pizza. Kay Kane said pizza, and also someone else said pizza like a few weeks ago, so we can do that. Hello, Ifalos. Thank you for the follow. Ifalos, if you feel so inclined, you can introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us what you'd like to learn about baking or what you already know about baking, what you like to bake. Um, or you can also just, you know, silently watch. That's also okay. They call that lurking, I heard on Twitch. You can lurk. But yeah, they do. I mean, if you feel intimidated by making your own sourdough, I know you can buy it. Sourdough starter, you can buy it, or you can snatch it from a friend who has their own sourdough starter. Like I said, it lasts forever. It's an indefinite product, and you can multiply it just by feeding it. So if your friend has one, he or she can feed it a little extra and give you some of it. And if you make your own, you could do the same with your friends as well. It's just all around a great thing to have. And you'll never be out of yeast packets because you have your own yeast packet. But yeah, for those of you who just came in, what we're doing now is when I'm done with this stream, which will be soon, we'll end a little early, but because we finished shaping them. But I shaped these loaves and I'm going to put them in the fridge for tomorrow. And then tomorrow I'm going to bake them. And then for those of you who are only following me on here, I'm not able to post pictures on Twitch yet. Maybe I will once I'm an affiliate. I don't know how it works. So I don't post the loaves on Twitch, but I do post the finished loaves on my YouTube channel and on my Instagram. So if you're interested in how these loaves come out tomorrow, I will post them tomorrow on my Instagram and on my YouTube channel. So you can follow me on there or subscribe on there, and you'll be able to see them. And like I said, so like I asked earlier if you have any suggestions. I'm still open to suggestions. But next week, we're going to be doing what I have written down. If it's written, it will be done, right? So what I have written down is we're going to make flatbread, which will actually be similar to this, except I'm going to, I'm not going to make it into a sandwich. And it's going to be spelt flatbread, and I'm going to do 50% spelt. I do this all the time, and that's really great because that's 50% whole grains in the bread, so that's great. And spelt flour is actually really stretchy. It doesn't have as much gluten as regular bread flour, but it's very elastic, which is good when I'm making the flatbread because I can stretch it out far to make a flatbread. So that's what we'll be doing next week, and I'll also be making in between because that won't take so long to do. I'll make a peanut bread. So peanut bread. It's going to be peanut cornbread is what it's going to be. So it will be peanut bread, but it's going to be a peanut cornbread with the sourdough starter. So that's the plan for next week. Follow, watch out for the notification that I'm live. It'll be next Saturday, 8 a.m. Eastern time. And usually I have a stream on Wednesday, but I decided to do, hopefully the schedule isn't too complicated, but I decided to do 3 days on and 1 day off. And all that means is that for the first 3 weeks of the month, I'll be doing a eat lunch with me on Wednesday. I call it midweek toast. And then the fourth day, I won't be doing it. So next week, I'm going to skip the midweek toast. But the next week after that, on Wednesday at 1 p.m., we'll have I'll show you what I put on toast. I'll show you basically what to do with some of this bread if you're making it. And so I'll show you what to put on toast, and we can just chat for a few hours. And that's Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So are there any more questions on what we did today, or any more suggestions, or any more interesting tidbits about what you bake or what you like to cook? Okay, so then I'll see everyone next week. This stream is going to be, it's going to automatically be on Twitch right away. But hopefully tomorrow, I'm a little behind on posting them on YouTube. I'm going to take all these streams and post them on YouTube. I also want to post on YouTube. Right now I have some videos. If you go to my YouTube page, you'll see them. They're just videos showing the process of making the bread. So I have one on the masa sourdough. I have one on the bagels. I have one on the plain sourdough. And I feel like I downloaded one more. I do have a short on the sandwich bread, but I have to finish the longer video as well. But you'll see that there. I want to work on making more of those and also expanding my YouTube videos. So keep an eye out on that. So we'll see. I want to get more creative. So we'll see what happens. I don't have it all figured out yet, but I have some ideas. So keep an eye out on that. And also I'll post updates on YouTube and Instagram if you want to follow me there. I'm also on TikTok and other social media, but I'm old and I don't get how to use TikTok. So, so yeah, you can follow me there too as well. But if you have no more questions or feedback, I'll see everyone next Saturday. Like I said, if you can't catch me, the Twitch stream will be on automatically on Twitch, and I'll also put it on YouTube if you're interested, but you can't make it for whatever reason. Okay. Well, bye everyone. Hopefully I'll see everyone next Saturday.